Jim Blake's wanted poster went up on Tuesday. By Friday, half of Dodge City believed he'd lost his mind. The other half thought he'd turned outlaw. The poster hung outside the sheriff's office on Main Street, black ink on cheap paper, Jim's face drawn rough but recognizable. The words underneath read simple and cold, harboring a fugitive. Jim Blake. Reward. Nobody in Dodge City had ever seen Jim Blake break a law. Not once in the 10 years he'd lived out on that lonely ranch past the river. He kept to himself mostly, bought supplies every 2 weeks, paid in cash, said thank you, left. But now his face was on that poster, and Sheriff Eli Thompson was telling anyone who'd listen that Jim had gone and kidnapped the prisoner right out from under the law's nose. "Cut her down himself," Thompson said, standing in the middle of the Longhorn Saloon that Wednesday afternoon. His badge caught the light coming through the dirty windows. Girl was set for proper punishment. Blake interfered with justice. The bartender wiped a glass slow. "What did she do?" "Theft," Thompson said. His voice was flat. "Sure. Stole from my office, money that wasn't hers. And Blake just took her, rode off like some kind of hero." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Only heroes don't run from the law. Outlaws do." By Thursday, the story had grown. Some folks said Jim had always been strange, living alone like that. No wife, no family anyone knew about. A man who kept that much to himself had to be hiding something. Others weren't so sure. Jim Blake had never caused trouble, never raised his voice, never so much as looked at another man's property with want in his eyes. But the poster was there, and Thompson wore a badge, and badges meant something in Kansas where the law was often the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. 3 days after that poster went up, Jim Blake was riding hard across the open prairie. The sun sat high and mean overhead. No shade anywhere, just grass stretching to the horizon in every direction. He wasn't alone. A young woman rode behind him. Her name was Rose Miller. She was 22 years old. Her wrists were wrapped in clean bandages. The rope burns underneath were still fresh, still angry red. She held on to Jim's waist as the horse moved steady beneath them. Her grip was tight, not because she was afraid of falling, but because men with guns were somewhere behind them in all that empty Kansas. Nothing. "How much further?" Rose asked. Her voice was rough, dry. "Fort Dodge," Jim said. He didn't turn around, just kept his eyes on the horizon. "Maybe 2 days if we push hard. And if they catch us before then—" Jim was quiet for a moment. The only sound was hoofbeats and wind through grass. "Then we die honest," he said. Rose didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. The truth they carried would get them both killed if the wrong people caught up first. But dying with a lie in your mouth was worse than dying with the truth on your tongue. At least that's what Jim Blake believed. And Rose was starting to believe it too. The horse's name was Samuel. He was 12 years old, strong shoulders, good temperament. Jim had raised him from a colt. Now Samuel was carrying 2 people who'd become fugitives in less than a week. They rode until the sun started dropping toward the western edge of the world. Then Jim found a spot where the grass grew tall and a few scrubby trees offered some cover from the wind. He helped Rose down first. She moved stiff. Everything hurt. The torture frame had done damage that wouldn't heal quick. Jim unsaddled Samuel and rubbed him down with handfuls of grass, gave him water from one of the 2 canteens they'd managed to grab before running. Rose sat on the ground and pulled her knees up to her chest, watched Jim work. He moved efficient, no wasted motion, like a man who'd spent years doing things alone and learned to do them right the first time. "You check the horizon much?" she asked. Jim glanced back the way they'd come. Nothing but grass and sky, no dust cloud, no riders. "Every few minutes," he said. "See anything?" "Not yet." He tied Samuel to one of the stunted trees, sat down across from Rose. "But they're coming." Rose nodded. She knew. Thompson wasn't the kind of man who let things go, especially not things that could ruin him. "Why'd you do it?" she asked suddenly. Jim looked at her. His face was weathered, deep lines around his eyes from years of squinting into sun and wind. He was near 50, old enough to know better than to throw his life away for a stranger. "Do what?" "Cut me down," Rose said. "You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything." Jim was quiet. He pulled a piece of dried beef from his saddlebag, tore it in half, handed one piece to Rose. "You were hanging there like an animal," he said finally. "Nobody deserves that." "I stole from him," Rose said. "Thompson, I went into his office and opened his safe and took his money. I'm a thief." "Maybe so." Jim chewed slow. "But torture ain't justice." Rose looked down at her bandaged wrists, remembered the feeling of those ropes pulling tight, the sun burning her skin, the fear that she'd die out there and nobody would care. "Most men would have rode past," she said quietly. Jim didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice carried something heavy, something old. "I rode past once before," he said. "Long time ago. Been living with that mistake ever since." Rose wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his face told her the story wasn't ready to be told yet, so she just ate her dried beef and watched the sky turn from blue to pink to purple, and tried not to think about what would happen if Thompson's men caught up before they reached Fort Dodge. They didn't build a fire. Too risky. Smoke could be seen for miles on the flat prairie. Instead, they sat in the growing dark and listened to the wind move through the grass. It sounded like water, like the world was an ocean, and they were drowning slow. "Tell me about Fort Dodge," Rose said after a while. "Military outpost," Jim said. "Federal jurisdiction. Thompson's badge means nothing there." "You think they'll believe us?" "They'll investigate. That's all we need. Once they start digging, they'll find what Thompson buried." Rose felt her stomach tighten. The image came back unbidden. The Wells Fargo man hitting the floor, Thompson standing over him with that gun, the sound of the wagon wheels as he hauled the body away toward the river. "I should have spoken sooner," she whispered. Jim looked at her across the darkness. "You were afraid." "I was a coward." "Fear doesn't make you a coward." His voice was gentle, firm. "Staying afraid when you got a chance to be brave, that's different. You're speaking now. That's what matters." Rose wanted to believe him, wanted to think that 3 weeks of silence could be forgiven by finally telling the truth. But Daniel Donovan was still in the ground, and his wife was still posting missing notices all over Dodge City, and Rose had known where he was the whole time. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked. "Then we make them believe." "How?" Jim shifted, pulled his coat tighter against the cooling air. "I got the money you stole. Still got Thompson's marking on the bag. Wells Fargo can verify if it matches their missing shipment. That's just theft. Doesn't prove murder." "No," Jim agreed. "But it's a start. Get federal men asking questions, things have a way of coming to light." Rose hoped he was right. But hope was a fragile thing when you were running from a man with a badge and a gun and a need to keep his secrets buried. She lay down on the hard ground, used her arm as a pillow, stared up at the stars. There were so many. More than she'd ever seen in her life. Living in towns, you forgot how big the sky really was, how small you were underneath it. "Jim," she said after a while. "Yeah? Thank you." Her voice was almost too quiet to hear. "For not riding past." Jim didn't answer, but Rose heard him shift in the darkness, heard the sound of him settling against the base of the tree. And for the first time in 3 days, she let herself believe they might actually make it to Fort Dodge alive. 4 days before the wanted poster went up, Jim Blake was just a rancher. Not a wanted man. Not yet. He woke before dawn like always. The house was small, one room mostly, a bed in the corner, a table, 2 chairs, though he only ever used one, a stove that worked when the wind wasn't blowing too hard. He'd built it himself 10 years back when he first came to Kansas. Built it to last. Built it to be alone in. Jim pulled on his boots, made coffee in the battered tin pot, stood at the window, and watched the sun come up over the endless grass. It was going to be hot. You could tell by the way the air felt even before the light arrived. Heavy. Still. He drank his coffee black, ate yesterday's biscuit, went out to feed the horses. Samuel came to the fence first, then the mare Judith, and the old gelding Moses, who was too slow for riding anymore, but Jim couldn't bring himself to put down. "Morning," Jim said to them, like he did every day. Talking to horses was better than talking to yourself. Horses didn't argue back. He fed them, checked the water trough, started working on the fence section that had gone loose during last week's storm. It was honest work, simple work. the kind that kept your hands busy and your mind quiet. Jim had learned to appreciate quiet after Junction City, after Mary, after the badge he'd turned in and the life he'd walked away from. Out here on the prairie, nobody asked questions. Nobody cared what you'd done before or who you'd been. You were just a man trying to make a living from stubborn land and harder weather. That suited Jim fine. He was hammering in a new post when he saw it. Something on the horizon, dark against the pale morning sky. Not moving. Jim stopped working, squinted into the distance. His eyes weren't what they used to be, but they were good enough to know that what he was seeing shouldn't be there. He left the fence, went back to the house, got his rifle, saddled Samuel. Probably nothing, he said to the horse, but he brought the rifle anyway. It took 20 minutes to reach the spot, 20 minutes of riding across grass that whispered and swayed, 20 minutes of that dark shape getting bigger, more defined. When Jim saw what it was, he pulled Samuel to a stop so hard the horse tossed his head in protest. A wooden frame, shaped like a capital A, standing alone in the middle of nowhere, and hanging from that frame was a girl. Her wrists were tied to the top beam, her ankles bound together. The ropes pulled her body into a shape that wasn't natural, wasn't right. She wasn't moving. Jim's heart dropped into his boots. He spurred Samuel forward, jumped down before the horse fully stopped. "Miss," his voice came out rough. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. He got closer, saw her face, saw the bruises, the sunburn, the way her lips were cracked and bleeding, saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest, still alive, barely. Jim pulled his knife from his belt, reached for the ropes. That's when her eyes opened, confused, afraid, like she was seeing him through water. Her mouth moved. Sound came out so quiet he almost didn't hear it. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't do this." Jim froze, not because of the words, but because of the way she said them, like she thought he was there to finish what someone else had started. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quickly. "I'm going to cut you down." She stared at him, trying to understand, trying to decide if he was lying. Jim didn't wait for permission. He reached up and started cutting through the rope that held her wrists. The girl flinched, but she didn't have the strength to pull away. The rope snapped. She dropped like a stone. Jim caught her halfway to the ground. Her weight hit his chest and knocked the wind out of him. She gasped, air tearing into her lungs like broken glass. He lowered her the rest of the way, gentle as he could, laid her on the grass. "You're all right," he said. Knew it was a lie, but said it anyway. "You're all right now." The girl's eyes rolled back. She was going in and out. Shock, probably. Dehydration, definitely. Jim grabbed his canteen, lifted her head, let water touch her lips. She drank, choked, drank again. "Easy," Jim said. "Not too fast." She pushed the canteen away after a few sips, looked at him with eyes that were trying hard to focus. "Who did this?" Jim asked. The girl's mouth moved, formed a word that made Jim's blood run cold. "Thompson. Sheriff Eli Thompson. The law in Dodge City." Jim sat back on his heels, looked at the torture frame, looked at the girl, looked back at the frame. This wasn't justice. This wasn't even punishment. This was cruelty wearing a badge. "Why?" he asked. The girl closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was flat, accepting. "I stole from him." There it was. A confession. She was a thief. Thompson had every right to lock her up, put her in front of a judge. But this was something else. Jim made a decision right there in the grass under the hot Kansas sun. The kind of decision that would change everything. "Can you ride?" he asked. The girl opened her eyes again. "What? Can you ride a horse?" I don't know." "We're going to find out." Jim stood, went to Samuel, brought the horse over. "What's your name?" "Rose," she whispered. "Rose Miller." "Jim Blake." He helped her sit up. She swayed but didn't fall. "I'm taking you to my ranch. You need water, food, rest." "He'll come for me." "I know." "You don't understand." Rose looked at him with something like pity. "He'll come for you too, for helping me." Jim helped her to her feet. She couldn't stand on her own. He had to hold most of her weight. "Then he'll come," Jim said. "But you ain't dying out here like an animal." He lifted her into the saddle. She slumped forward, grabbed the horn to keep from falling. Jim swung up behind her, put one arm around her waist to hold her steady. Samuel started walking, carrying both of them away from that cursed frame, away from the middle of nowhere, towards something that might pass for safety. Rose's head fell back against Jim's shoulder. She was fading again. "Stay awake," Jim said. "Just a little longer. Stay awake." "Why are you doing this?" she mumbled. Jim didn't answer right away. How could he explain that he'd seen this before, that he'd stood by once and watched injustice happen and done nothing, that he'd made a promise to a dying woman in a cold jail cell 10 years ago, a promise he'd broken every day since by staying silent, staying safe. "Because it's the right thing," he said finally. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. They rode toward his ranch, toward clean water and shade and bandages, and behind them the torture frame stood empty, creaking in the wind, a warning to anyone who crossed Sheriff Eli Thompson, but Jim Blake had just crossed him anyway. Rose woke in a real bed for the first time in 4 days. The mattress was thin, the blanket was rough, but it was softer than the floor of a jail cell, softer than the ground under a torture frame. She opened her eyes, saw wooden beams overhead, a small window letting in afternoon light, a table with a basin and pitcher. Not a jail, not a dream. She sat up slow. Every muscle screamed. The rope burns on her wrists were wrapped in clean cloth. Someone had washed her face, given her water. The room was tiny, just the bed, the table, a chair in the corner with folded clothes on it. Rose's own dress was torn, filthy. Whoever had brought her here, they'd left her something clean to wear. She stood on shaking legs, changed into the clothes. They were too big. Men's clothes, probably, but they were clean. The door opened onto a main room, small, spare, a stove, a table with 2 chairs, shelves with basic supplies, everything neat, everything in its place. Through the window she could see a man working outside. Jim Blake, the rancher who'd cut her down. Rose watched him for a moment. He was fixing something on the fence, working steady, focused. He didn't look like a hero, just looked like a man doing what needed doing. She turned away from the window, started looking for water, found a pitcher on the counter, poured herself a cup, drank it down. That's when she noticed the drawer was half open. She shouldn't have looked. It wasn't her business. But her hand moved before her brain could stop it. Inside the drawer was a tarnished badge, 5-pointed star. The words Deputy Marshal stamped across the front. Rose picked it up, turned it over in her hands. It was old, the metal worn smooth in places. "You were a lawman." The voice came from behind her. Rose spun around, nearly dropped the badge. Jim stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable. "I'm sorry," Rose said quickly. I didn't mean to. It's all right." Jim came inside, closed the door, looked at the badge in her hand. "That was a long time ago." Rose set the badge on the table. "You were a deputy marshal. Junction City, 10 years back." Jim moved to the stove, started making coffee. "Wore that badge for 3 years. What happened?" Jim was quiet. The coffee started to boil. He poured 2 cups, handed one to Rose. She wrapped her hands around it. The warmth felt good. "I learned the difference between law and justice," Jim said finally. He sat at the table, stared at the badge. "Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they ain't." Rose sat across from him. "And you stopped being a deputy because the law killed my wife." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Rose didn't know what to say. What could you say to something like that? Jim took a sip of coffee, set the cup down careful. When he spoke again, his voice was distant, like he was seeing something far away. "Her name was Mary. Sweetest woman you'd ever meet. We had a small place on the edge of town. She sold eggs. I wore the badge. We got by." He paused. Rose stayed quiet. Let him take his time. Sheriff in Junction City was a man named Hawkins, corrupt as they come. Had his hand in everything illegal that moved through that town. Took bribes, looked the other way, sometimes helped make the crimes happen. And you knew, I suspected, but I was young, new, didn't think it was my place to question the sheriff. Jim's jaw tightened. One of Hawkins's deputies was a man named Thompson. Eli Thompson. Rose's breath caught. The same man who hung you on that frame. Jim's eyes were hard now, angry. He was learning the trade back then, learning how to twist the law into whatever shape he needed. Jim stood, walked to the window, looked out at his land. Mary saw something she shouldn't have, he said quietly. Money changing hands, a deal between Hawkins and some cattle rustlers. She didn't understand what she was seeing, but Hawkins knew she'd seen it. Rose felt cold despite the coffee. What did he do? Planted stolen goods in our house. Had Thompson arrest her for theft. I was out on patrol when it happened. By the time I got back, she was already in a cell. You couldn't prove she was innocent. I tried. Jim's voice cracked, just a little. I went to the judge, brought character witnesses, showed how the evidence didn't make sense. But Hawkins was smart. He'd covered his tracks. And the judge owed Hawkins favors. Jim turned to face Rose. His eyes were red. Mary died in that cell 3 weeks later. Pneumonia. They wouldn't let me take her to a doctor. Said she was a flight risk. Rose felt tears on her own face. She didn't even realize she was crying. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Jim nodded. Last time I saw her alive, she was burning with fever. Could barely speak. But she grabbed my hand, made me promise something. What? That next time I saw injustice, I wouldn't stay quiet. I wouldn't be afraid. I'd stand up. Jim picked up the badge from the table. She died that night. I turned in this badge the next morning. Couldn't wear it anymore. Couldn't serve a system that killed innocent people. He set the badge back down, gentle, like it might break. I came to Kansas to forget. Built this place with my own hands, stayed away from towns, from people, from anything that might make me have to choose between safety and doing what's right. Rose understood now why he'd cut her down, why he'd brought her here even though she was a thief. I'm your second chance, she said quietly. Jim looked at her. Maybe. Or maybe you're just a girl who needed help. Either way, I couldn't ride past. Not again. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, both carrying the weight of their pasts. Finally, Rose spoke. What you did today, cutting me down, Thompson's not going to let that go. I know. He'll come here. I know that too. Rose leaned forward. Jim, I stole from him. I deserve punishment. You could still... No. Jim's voice was firm. You deserve a trial. A judge. A chance to defend yourself. You don't deserve to hang in the sun like an animal. But now you're in danger too. I've been in danger before. Jim stood. Started gathering supplies. Get some rest. Eat something. Eat. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Rose watched him move around the small house. This man who'd lost everything because he stayed silent. Who'd spent 10 years alone because of that choice. And now he was risking what little safety he'd built. For her. A stranger. A thief. Jim, she said. He looked back. Thank you. For keeping your promise to Mary. Something shifted in his face. Softened. Thank you for giving me a chance to keep it. Morning came too quiet. Jim woke before dawn out of habit, lay on the cot by the stove and listened to the silence. No birds, no wind, just still air that felt like waiting. He got up, made coffee, checked on Rose. She was still sleeping in his bed. Her breathing was steady now. Better than yesterday. He went outside, fed the horses, checked the horizon. Nothing yet. But they were coming. He could feel it. Jim spent the morning doing normal ranch work. Fixed that fence section, checked the water trough. Tried to act like this was just another day. Rose came out around mid-morning, moving slow but moving on her own. How do you feel? Jim asked. Like I got dragged behind a horse. She tried to smile. It didn't quite work. But better. Thank you. There's food inside. Help yourself. Rose nodded, started toward the house, then stopped. Jim, someone's coming. He turned, looked where she was pointing. 3 riders. Still far off but getting closer. The dust from their horses rose in the still morning air. Jim's chest tightened. "Get inside. Stay away from the windows." "Jim. Inside. Now." Rose ran for the house. Jim walked to the porch, picked up the rifle leaning against the wall. Didn't aim it, just held it, loose, ready. The 3 riders came on steady, not rushing, not slow. The pace of men who knew they had the law on their side. When they got close enough, Jim recognized the man in front, Sheriff Eli Thompson. Same badge, same cold eyes, same smile that never reached past his teeth. The 2 men behind him were deputies. One Jim didn't know, the other was Marcus Reed. Young, decent kid, probably didn't know what kind of man he was working for. Thompson reined in at the fence, sat his horse like he owned everything he could see. "Morning, Blake." His voice was friendly, the kind of friendly that had teeth behind it. "Thompson." Jim kept his voice flat, neutral. "Nice place you got here. Quiet, private." Thompson looked around, taking in the house, the barn, the land. Man could hide all kinds of things out here. Nobody would know. "I'm not hiding anything." "No." Thompson's smile widened. "Funny. I'm missing a prisoner, young woman, name of Rose Miller. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Jim said nothing. "See, thing is," Thompson continued, "somebody cut her down from where I'd put her, took her away. Now that's interfering with lawful punishment. That's a crime, Blake. Torture isn't lawful." The smile disappeared. "You questioning how I do my job? I'm saying I found a girl dying in the sun. I brought her here so she wouldn't die." "Noble." Thompson leaned forward in his saddle. "Where is she now?" "Safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Behind Thompson, Deputy Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Jim caught his eye, saw doubt there. Good. Maybe not everyone who wore a badge was rotten. Thompson's voice went hard. "Blake, you're harboring a fugitive. That's against the law. Now you got 2 choices. Bring her out here right now, or I come back with more men and we tear this place apart." "She deserves a trial," Jim said. "A judge, not a rope in the middle of nowhere. She stole from my office, from me directly. I got every right to punish her as I see fit." "No." Jim's grip tightened on the rifle. "You got the right to arrest her, not torture her." "Careful, Blake." Thompson's hand rested on his gun, casual, threatening. "You're dancing real close to joining her in a cell. Then I guess I'll see you in front of a judge, too." For a long moment nobody moved. The 2 deputies looked at each other, unsure. Jim kept his eyes on Thompson. Finally the sheriff straightened in his saddle. The smile came back, colder now. "You're making a mistake," Thompson said. "A big one. Won't be my first." Thompson turned his horse, started to leave, then stopped, looked back. "Justice ain't about truth, Blake. It's about order. And when men like you start deciding which laws to follow and which to ignore, that's when order breaks down. That's when people get hurt." Jim said nothing. Thompson rode off. The 2 deputies followed. Marcus looked back once before disappearing over the rise. Jim stood on the porch until they were out of sight. Then he walked back inside. Rose was standing in the kitchen, pale, shaking. "He knows I'm here," she said. "Yeah." "He'll come back." "Yeah." "Jim, I can't let you—" "Stop." Jim set the rifle down, looked at her straight. "I made a choice yesterday when I cut you down. I'm not changing my mind now." "But, Rose, listen to me." His voice was gentle but firm. "You saw something, didn't you? Something more than just money in a safe." Rose's face went white. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't lie. Not to me." Jim stepped closer. "Thompson doesn't torture people over theft. Not like that. He wants you dead. There's a reason." Rose closed her eyes. Her whole body was shaking now. "Rose, what did you see?" When she opened her eyes, they were full of tears, full of fear, full of a truth she'd been carrying alone for too long. "I saw him kill a man," she whispered. "A Wells Fargo messenger. Shot him right there in the office. Took the money he was carrying, wrapped the body in a tarp and drove it out toward the river." Jim felt the world shift under his feet. When? 3 weeks ago. Rose was crying now. I was cleaning late. Thompson thought I'd gone home. I heard them arguing, heard the shot. I hid, watched him, and then I just stayed quiet. Why didn't you tell anyone? Who was I going to tell? Rose's voice cracked. He's the sheriff. He's the law. Who would believe me? Jim understood. He'd asked himself the same question 10 years ago about Hawkins. That's why you stole the money, he said quietly. Not because you're a thief. Because you wanted proof. Rose nodded. I thought if I could get the money back to Wells Fargo, they'd investigate. They'd find out what happened. But I got caught before I could. And Thompson strung you up, hoping the sun would kill you before you could talk. Yes. Jim walked to the window, looked out at the empty prairie. Thompson was out there somewhere, planning his next move. We can't stay here, Jim said. Thompson knows where you are now. He'll come back tonight, tomorrow, soon. Where can we go? Jim turned to face her. Fort Dodge, federal jurisdiction, military law. Thompson's badge means nothing there. You think they'll believe me? I think they'll investigate, and investigation is all we need. Jim started gathering supplies. Get ready to ride. We leave in an hour. Jim, if we run, there's no coming back. You'll be wanted. Your life here, it'll be over. Jim looked at her, at this girl who'd been brave enough to steal evidence, who'd survived torture, who was still trying to protect him even though she barely knew him. I lost my life once already, he said. Been living half dead for 10 years. Maybe it's time I started living again. Rose wiped her eyes, nodded. What do you need me to do? Pack light. We're going to be riding hard. As Rose went to gather what little she had, Jim stood in his small house and looked around. This place had been his hiding spot, his way of avoiding the world, avoiding choice, avoiding the risk of caring. Now he was leaving it behind, maybe forever. But Mary's promise was finally being kept, and that was worth more than any amount of safety. Sarah Donovan arrived in Dodge City on a Thursday afternoon. She came by stage from Denver, carried one small bag and a photograph wrapped in cloth. The photograph showed a man in his 30s, dark hair, kind eyes, a Wells Fargo badge pinned to his vest. Daniel Donovan, her husband, missing for 3 weeks. Sarah stepped off the stage into the dust and heat of Main Street. The driver handed down her bag, tipped his hat, drove on toward the livery. She stood there for a moment, looking at this town that might be the last place her husband had been alive. The first thing she did was find the Wells Fargo office, a small building on the corner. The agent inside was a tired-looking man named Patterson. Mrs. Donovan? He stood when she entered. His face said he'd been expecting her, dreading her. I'm sorry there's no news yet. 3 weeks, Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. 3 weeks and nobody knows anything. Your husband was carrying a shipment to the railroad depot. He never arrived. We've sent inquiries, checked with every station along the route. Nothing. What about the local law? Patterson shifted, uncomfortable. Sheriff Thompson has been cooperative. He says Daniel never came through Dodge City. And you believe him? I have no reason not to. Sarah set her bag down, pulled out the photograph, unwrapped it carefully. I'm going to ask every person in this town if they've seen my husband. Someone knows something. Patterson looked at the photograph, at Daniel's face. Ma'am, I understand you want answers, but nothing. Sarah's voice cracked, just a little. He's out there somewhere, alive or... She couldn't finish. I need to know. Patterson nodded slowly. I'll help however I can. Sarah spent the rest of Thursday afternoon making posters, missing in large letters across the top. Daniel's description below, the photograph in the center, a promise of reward for information. By Friday morning, those posters were all over Dodge City, on buildings, on fence posts, outside the saloon and the general store and the church. People looked at them. Some asked questions. Most just shook their heads and moved on. Sarah asked everyone she met, Have you seen this man 3 weeks ago? He was carrying a leather bag, Wells Fargo badge. Nobody had. or nobody was saying. Jim saw one of the posters when he rode into town for supplies. Friday morning, before Thompson came to his ranch, before everything went sideways, he stood in front of the general store, stared at Daniel Donovan's face. Missing the poster said, "Daniel Donovan, Wells Fargo Messenger, last seen August 14th, 3 weeks ago, right around when Rose said she saw Thompson kill someone." Jim's stomach went cold. He glanced around, saw a woman across the street, talking to the blacksmith, showing him something. A photograph, probably. That would be the wife, Sarah Donovan. Jim watched her for a moment, saw the desperate hope in the way she moved, the careful way she held that photograph, like it was the most precious thing in the world. She didn't know her husband was dead, didn't know he was buried somewhere along the Arkansas River, didn't know the law she was asking for help had pulled the trigger. Jim turned away, went into the store, got what he needed, left before the widow could ask him questions he couldn't answer yet. But he couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she was looking for answers that would break her heart. When Jim got back to the ranch, Rose was sitting on the porch. She looked better, stronger. The rest and food were helping. He told her about the posters, about Sarah Donovan asking questions all over town. Rose's face went pale. "She's here in Dodge City, looking for her husband." Rose stood, walked to the edge of the porch, wrapped her arms around herself. "She doesn't know." "No. Someone should tell her." "We will," Jim said. "Once we get to Fort Dodge, once we have federal law on our side, then she'll get answers, and Daniel will get justice." Rose nodded, but Jim could see the guilt eating at her. 3 weeks of silence, 3 weeks of letting this woman search for a husband who was already in the ground. "I'm a coward," Rose whispered. "You're afraid. That's different." "Is it?" She turned to look at him. "She's out there asking questions, hoping, and I know the truth. I've known for 3 weeks." Jim stepped closer. "You're going to tell the truth, soon. That takes courage." "Does it? Or am I just saving my own skin?" "Can't it be both?" Jim's voice was gentle. "We don't have to be saints to do the right thing. We just have to be willing." Rose looked out at the prairie, at the endless grass and sky. "What if she hates me when she finds out I knew and didn't speak? Maybe she will, maybe she won't, but she'll know the truth, and knowing is better than wondering forever." Rose didn't answer, just stood there holding herself together, carrying the weight of Daniel Donovan's death and his widow's hope. Jim left her alone with her thoughts, went to prepare the horses. They were leaving in an hour, whether Rose's guilt was settled or not, because Thompson was coming. And when he did, talking time would be over. They should have left sooner. Jim knew it the moment the sun went down and the horses started getting nervous. Animals could sense things, danger mostly, and Samuel was tossing his head, stepping sideways, acting like something was wrong. "What is it?" Rose asked. She was already packed, ready to ride. Jim listened, heard nothing but wind, but that didn't mean nothing was there. "Get on your horse," he said quietly. "Now." Rose moved fast, grabbed her bag, went to the mare Judith. Jim had saddled her an hour ago just in case. Jim doused the lamps inside the house, left everything dark, grabbed his rifle and the saddlebags with their supplies. That's when he heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming from the east, not from the road, from the open prairie. Thompson wasn't announcing himself this time. "Jim," Rose's voice was tight with fear, "ride, north, don't stop until you hit the river." "What about you?" "I'll catch up. Go, now." Rose hesitated, then she dug her heels in. Judith took off into the darkness. Jim swung onto Samuel, started to follow, then heard the shout. "Blake, we know you're in there." Thompson's voice, coming from the other side of the house. Jim cursed, turned Samuel toward the barn. There was a back way out, through the corral, into the grass beyond. Gunshots cracked the night air, aimed high, warning shots. "Come out, Blake. You and the girl. Nobody has to get hurt." Jim rode hard for the corral. Behind him he heard men dismounting, boots hitting the ground. Thompson had brought at least 4, maybe more. Samuel cleared the fence, landed running. The darkness swallowed them both. More gunshots, closer now. One buzzed past Jim's ear like an angry wasp. They were shooting to kill. Jim leaned low over Samuel's neck. Let the horse run. Trusted him to find his footing in the dark. Behind them the shouts continued. Men yelling, organizing. Someone was already on a horse, chasing. Jim looked back, saw a torch, then another. They were lighting the night, making it easier to track. He faced forward, scanned the darkness for Rose. Couldn't see her. Good. She was ahead. Safe for now. The prairie at night was treacherous, holes hidden in the grass, rocks waiting to break a horse's leg. But Jim knew this land. He'd ridden it for 10 years. Thompson didn't. Jim angled left, toward rougher ground, where the grass grew in thick tufts and the earth was uneven, where a man who didn't know the terrain would have to slow down. He heard a shout behind him, a horse stumbling. Good. But there were more, and they were spreading out, trying to flank him. Jim pushed Samuel harder. The horse was breathing heavy but not laboring, still had speed left. A rider appeared on his right, coming fast. Jim couldn't see his face but saw the gun. The shot went wide. Jim didn't return fire, just rode. Another rider on the left now, closer. Jim could hear him shouting, "Stop, stop, or we shoot!" Jim kept riding. The next shot wasn't a warning. It hit the ground 3 feet from Samuel's hooves. The horse shied, nearly threw Jim. He held on, kept moving. Then he saw her. Rose. Up ahead. Judith was fast, but Rose wasn't a strong rider. She was bouncing in the saddle, losing time. Jim caught up, rode alongside. "Stay with me," he shouted over the wind. Rose looked at him. Her face was white in the starlight, terrified. "I can't." "Yes, you can. The river's not far." Behind them, the pursuit was gaining. 3 riders now, maybe 4, all with guns, all with orders to bring them back dead or alive, probably dead. The ground started to slope. They were getting close to the Arkansas River. The banks were steep here, dangerous, but the river meant water, meant they could lose the trail. "We're going in," Jim yelled. "What?" "The river. When we hit the bank, jump." "Jim, I can't swim." His heart stopped. "What?" "I never learned." The riders behind them were 50 yards back now, closing fast. Jim made a split-second decision, the kind that either saved lives or ended them. "Hold on to Judith's mane. Don't let go no matter what." The riverbank appeared out of the darkness, a sudden drop, 6 feet, maybe 8. Jim spurred Samuel. The horse leaped. For a moment they were flying, weightless, falling through black air. Then the water hit like a fist, cold, dark, current pulling. Jim went under, came up gasping. Samuel was swimming, strong strokes, head above water. "Rose!" Jim shouted, looked around frantic. There, 10 yards downstream, Judith swimming hard, Rose clinging to her mane, her head barely above the surface. Jim swam toward them. The current was fierce, trying to pull them all apart. Behind them on the bank, men were shouting. Someone fired a shot. It hit the water harmless. "Don't shoot, you idiots," Thompson's voice. "You'll hit the horses." Jim reached Rose, grabbed her arm. "You all right?" She coughed, nodded, couldn't speak. "Stay on, Judith. Don't let go." The current carried them downstream, away from the men, away from the torches, into the dark water and the darker night. Jim held on to Samuel with one hand, Rose's arm with the other, kept all of them moving together. The opposite bank appeared. Jim aimed for it. Let the current help. Let the horses do the work. They hit shallow water. The horses found their footing, scrambled up the muddy bank. Jim and Rose fell off, lay in the mud, breathing hard, soaked to the bone. "They'll cross," Rose gasped. "They'll find us." "Not tonight." Jim forced himself to sit up. "Current's too strong. They'll have to find a shallow crossing. That'll take time." "How much time?" "Maybe an hour, maybe less." He stood, helped Rose up. "We need to move." They were both shivering now. The night air was cool. Their wet clothes were stealing heat. Jim got the horses, checked them for injuries. They were fine, tired, but fine. He helped Rose back into the saddle. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Hold on," he said. "We'll find some place to warm up." They rode along the river, heading west, toward Fort Dodge, toward safety that was still 2 days away. Behind them on the other side of the river, torches moved. Men searching. Thompson wasn't giving up. But for now, in the darkness and the cold, they had distance. And distance meant time. And time meant a chance. An hour later they found an abandoned farmhouse. The roof was mostly gone, the walls were crumbling, but there was a corner that still had shelter, and enough dry wood for a small fire. Jim built the fire low, just enough to dry their clothes and warm their hands. Too much smoke would give them away. Rose sat close to the flames. Her lips were blue, her whole body shaking. Jim gave her his coat. It was wet too, but it was something. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me in the river. Wasn't going to do that." "You could have. Would have been easier." Jim looked at her. This girl who'd stolen to try to do the right thing, who'd survived torture, who'd just ridden through the night with men shooting at her. "Nothing about this is easy," he said, "but we're doing it anyway." They sat in silence for a while, warming up, listening to the night. Finally Rose spoke. "Jim, I need to tell you everything. About the night I saw Thompson kill Daniel Donovan." Jim nodded. "I'm listening." Rose took a breath, stared into the fire, and started talking. "I was cleaning his office. Late. Maybe 10 o'clock. Thompson had told me to finish up and lock the door when I left. I thought I was alone." She paused. Jim waited. "I heard voices outside. 2 men. One of them was Thompson. The other I didn't know. They came in through the back door. I panicked, hid in the supply closet. You could see them. Through a crack in the door. I saw everything." Rose's hands were shaking again, not from cold this time. "The other man was wearing a Wells Fargo vest. He had a leather bag, heavy, full of something. Money, probably. Daniel Donovan. I know that now. Didn't then. He was angry, telling Thompson the money was supposed to go to the railroad depot, that it was federal property, that Thompson couldn't just take a cut." Jim felt his jaw tighten. Thompson was stealing from Wells Fargo. Had been for months, I think. Daniel said something about every shipment, like it had been going on a while. "What happened next?" Rose closed her eyes. "Daniel said he was reporting it, going straight to the marshal. Thompson tried to talk him down, offering more money, a bigger share. But Daniel wouldn't budge. He kept saying, 'This is theft. I'm a federal employee. You're done.' Jim could see where this was going. And Thompson shot him." "Yes." Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. Daniel turned to leave. Thompson pulled his gun, shot him in the back. Daniel fell. Didn't move. The fire crackled. Sparks drifted up into the ruined roof. "I should have screamed," Rose said. "Should have run. Done something. But I just froze. Watched Thompson drag the body, wrap it in a tarp, load it in his wagon." "Where did he take it?" "Toward the river. There's a spot, a cut bank. Nobody goes there much." I followed at a distance, watched him dig, watched him bury Daniel Donovan like he was nothing. Jim sat back, processed this. "And the money?" Thompson took it back to his office, put it in the safe, like nothing had happened. "When did you steal it?" 2 days later. I thought if I could get it to Wells Fargo, they'd investigate. They'd find out about the missing messenger. They'd discover what Thompson had done. But he caught you. I got the money out. Was going to leave town that night, but he came back to the office, saw the safe was open, saw me with the bag." Rose looked at Jim. "He didn't arrest me right away. He smiled, asked me if I'd seen anything else, any other crimes." "You lied." "I said no. Said I just wanted the money. He didn't believe me. Said even if I was lying, it didn't matter. Nobody would believe a thief over a sheriff. Then he had me arrested, put me on that frame." Her voice cracked. "He was going to let me die out there, slow, painful, as a warning." Jim stood, walked to the broken window, looked out at the darkness. "Sarah Donovan is in Dodge City right now," he said quietly, "looking for her husband, putting up posters, asking questions. And Thompson is probably smiling at her, helping her search, all while knowing Daniel's in the ground." "I know." Rose's voice was thick with guilt. "I should have told her, should have told someone." "You're telling someone now, and when we get to Fort Dodge, you'll tell them too. Federal law. They'll dig up that cut bank, they'll find Daniel, and Thompson will hang." Rose stood, came to stand beside him. You really think they'll believe me? We got the money, we got your testimony, we know where the body is. Yeah, they'll believe you. Outside in the distance a coyote howled. The sound carried lonely across the prairie. We should sleep, Jim said. Few hours. Then we ride hard for Fort Dodge. Rose nodded, went to lie down near the fire. Jim stayed at the window, watching, waiting. Thompson was out there, hunting, desperate. A desperate man with a badge and a secret and a gun was the most dangerous kind. But Jim had made a promise to Mary, and Rose had the truth. Sometimes that had to be enough. Dawn came gray and cold. The fire had burned down to ash. Jim woke stiff and sore from sleeping on broken floorboards. Rose was already awake, sitting up, staring at the eastern sky. Sleep at all? Jim asked. Some. She looked at him. You? Enough. They ate what little food they had left. Dried meat, hard biscuit, shared water from the canteen. The horses were grazing outside, still tired but rested enough to ride. Jim saddled them both. Rose helped even though her hands were still shaking from yesterday, from the chase, from confessing what she'd seen. How far to Fort Dodge? She asked. Day and a half if we push hard, 2 days if we're careful. And Thompson? Jim looked back the way they'd come. Couldn't see anyone, but that didn't mean they weren't there. He'll be looking for where we crossed. Could be hours behind, could be minutes. Hard to say. Rose climbed onto Judith, winced as her rope-burned wrists took her weight. Then we should go. They rode west, following the Arkansas River, keeping it on their right. The water was still high from recent rains, still moving fast. The land here was rougher than Jim's ranch. More trees, more brush, better cover but harder riding. They stayed quiet mostly, saved their breath for the horses. Around mid-morning they had to cross the river again. The trail to Fort Dodge went north and the Arkansas curved south. They needed to get to the other side. Jim found a spot that looked shallow, led Samuel in first. The water came up to the horse's chest. The current pulled but not dangerously. Come on, Jim called back to Rose. It's all right. Rose guided Judith in. The mare balked, didn't like the water. Easy girl, Rose said. Easy. Judith took a step, then another. Then she was in, swimming where it got too deep. Rose held on to the saddle horn, her knuckles white. They were halfway across when Jim heard it, the sound he'd been dreading. Hoofbeats, coming fast, from the east. Rose, hurry. She looked back, saw them. 3 riders, maybe 4, too far to identify but close enough to be trouble. Rose kicked Judith. The mare swam harder, fought the current. Jim reached the far bank, turned Samuel, watched Rose struggle. She was 10 feet away. 8, 6. The riders hit the riverbank behind them, pulled up. One of them raised a rifle. Get down, Jim shouted. The shot cracked, hit the water 3 feet from Judith. Rose screamed, nearly fell, caught herself. 5 feet. 3. Jim reached out, grabbed Judith's bridle, pulled. The mare's hooves found bottom, scrambled up the bank. Rose collapsed forward, breathing hard. You hit? Jim asked. No, I'm fine. Another shot. This one hit a tree branch above them. Bark exploded. Jim looked back. The riders were entering the water now, coming across. We need to go, now. They rode, hard, fast, leaving the river behind, heading into rougher country where the horses would have to work harder. Behind them the pursuit continued. But Jim had distance now, and he knew this land better than Thompson's men did. He led Rose into a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep on both sides. The trail twisted, easy to get lost if you didn't know the way. They pushed through, came out the other side, kept riding. The sun climbed higher. The day got hot. The horses were tiring. Finally, around noon, Jim called a stop, found a cluster of rocks that offered shade and cover. They dismounted, checked the horses, gave them water. Rose sat on a rock. Her face was pale, exhausted. You did good, Jim said. I almost got us killed. But you didn't. You kept going. That's what matters. Rose looked at her bandaged wrists. How much longer can we keep running? We're not running. We're heading toward help. Feels like running. Jim sat beside her. Maybe, but sometimes the brave thing is knowing when to fight and when to move. Right now we move. We get to Fort Dodge. We get federal law on our side. Then we fight. Rose nodded. Didn't look convinced, but didn't argue. They rested for 20 minutes, then rode again. The afternoon passed slow, hot. Every shadow looked like a rider. Every sound like hoofbeats. But nobody came. By evening they'd put good distance between themselves and Thompson. Maybe. Jim found another spot to camp, a small grove of cottonwood trees near a stream. The horses could drink, they could rest. This time they didn't build a fire. Too risky. They ate cold food, drank cold water, sat in the gathering dark and listened to the world settle. "Jim," Rose said after a while. "Yeah. When we get to Fort Dodge, when they investigate, what happens to me?" Jim was quiet for a moment. "You'll have to testify. Tell them everything you saw. And then they'll decide if you committed a crime worth punishing. I stole money. You did. From a federal lawman. From a murderer who stole it first." Jim looked at her. "A judge might see it different than Thompson did. Or might not." "Or might not," Jim agreed. "But that's a chance you take. Prison's better than dying on a rope in the sun." Rose pulled her knees up, rested her chin on them. "I'm scared." "I know. Not just of Thompson, of what comes after, of telling Sarah Donovan that I knew her husband was dead and didn't say anything for 3 weeks. That'll be hard," Jim said honestly, "but she deserves the truth, and you're the only one who can give it to her." They sat in silence. The stars came out, more than you could count, the same stars that had watched Daniel Donovan die, the same stars that had watched Mary Blake die, the same stars that were watching Jim and Rose now, 2 people trying to do right in a world that made right hard to find. "Get some sleep," Jim said finally. "Tomorrow we cover serious ground." Rose lay down, used her bag as a pillow. "Jim?" "Yeah. Thank you. For not giving up on me." Jim watched the stars. Thought about Mary's promise. About the 10 years he'd spent hiding from it. "Thank you for giving me a reason not to," he said. But Rose was already asleep. They started riding before dawn, pushed hard through the morning. The land changed as they went. Fewer trees, more open prairie again, but different than back near Jim's ranch. This grass was shorter, the soil rockier. They were getting close to Fort Dodge. Jim could feel it. Another day, maybe less. Around mid-afternoon they saw it. A farmhouse sitting alone in the distance, abandoned by the looks of it. The roof sagging, the fields gone wild. Jim reined in, studied it. "What is it?" Rose asked. "Shelter, maybe, and a place to rest the horses properly." "Could be dangerous." "Could be. But we're 2 hours ahead of anyone following, and the horses need more than 20-minute breaks." Rose looked at the farmhouse, then at Judith. The mare was breathing hard, lathered with sweat. "All right," she said. They approached careful. Jim's hand stayed near his rifle. The farm was definitely abandoned. The windows were broken. The door hung crooked on one hinge. Weeds grew up through the porch boards. Jim dismounted, checked inside. Empty. Some broken furniture, a rusted stove, evidence of squatters at some point, but nobody recent. "It's clear," he called. Rose came in, looked around. "What happened here?" "Hard to say. Could be drought drove them off. Could be Indian trouble. Could be they just couldn't make it work." Jim walked to what used to be a window, looked out at the dead fields. "This land takes what it wants. Doesn't give much back." They brought the horses into what was left of the barn, gave them water from an old trough that still held rainwater, let them rest in the shade. Jim and Rose went back to the house, found a corner that still had most of its roof, sat down on the floor. For the first time in days, they weren't immediately running or hiding or terrified. The silence felt strange, almost too quiet. "How long can we stay?" Rose asked. "An hour. Maybe 2. Need to make sure nobody's following before we commit to more." Rose nodded, leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes. Jim watched her. She looked young, younger than 22. The kind of young that shouldn't know what murder looked like, shouldn't know what torture felt like. But the West didn't care about should. It only cared about what was. "Jim?" Rose said without opening her eyes. "Yeah. Do you think we're going to make it?" Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. "I don't know," Jim said. Rose opened her eyes, looked at him. "But I know we're going to try," he continued. "And sometimes trying is all you got." Before Rose could respond, they heard it. The sound that made Jim's blood run cold. A horse, nickering, from outside, but not their horses. Their horses were in the barn. Jim grabbed his rifle, moved to the window, looked out careful. A man on horseback, approaching slow, hands visible, empty, but he was wearing a badge. And Jim recognized him. Deputy Marcus Reed, alone. Jim kept the rifle pointed at the window, watched Marcus approach. The deputy was alone. That was good. But alone could be a trick, could be others waiting in the grass. Marcus stopped his horse 20 yards from the house, raised his hands. "Blake," he called, "I'm not here to fight." Jim didn't answer, just watched. "I know you're in there," Marcus's voice carried across the empty yard. "I tracked you from the river crossing, but I came alone. No Thompson, no other deputies, just me." Rose appeared beside Jim, whispered, "Is it a trap?" "Maybe." "Blake, I need to talk to you." Marcus was still sitting his horse, hands up. "Please, 5 minutes. Then I'll leave if you want." Jim made a decision, the kind that was probably stupid but felt necessary. He stepped out onto the broken porch, rifle ready but not aimed. "Get off your horse," Jim said. "Slow. Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus dismounted. Careful. His gun was still in its holster. He made no move toward it. "Walk forward. Stop at the porch." Marcus did. Stopped at the bottom step. Jim could see his face now. Young. Maybe 30. And tired. Like he hadn't slept in days. "What do you want, Marcus?" "To help you." "You're Thompson's deputy." "I was Thompson's deputy." Marcus's voice was tight. Angry. "Not anymore." Jim studied him. Looked for the lie. Couldn't find it. "Why?" Marcus glanced back toward where he'd come from, then looked at Jim straight. "Because I've been working for that man for 2 years, and I've wondered about things. Missing money. Cases that got closed too quick. People who crossed Thompson and ended up hurt or gone." He paused. "I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just a hard man doing a hard job. But then you cut down Rose Miller. She's a thief. She stole money Thompson shouldn't have had in the first place." Marcus took a step closer. Jim raised the rifle slightly. Marcus stopped. "I started asking questions about where that money came from, about why Thompson was so desperate to get the girl back, about why he'd torture someone over simple theft. And nobody would talk. Everyone's too afraid of him. But I kept digging." Marcus reached slowly into his coat pocket. Jim tensed. Marcus pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Found this in Thompson's desk when he sent me out on patrol yesterday. He didn't know I came back early." Marcus held up the paper. Jim couldn't read it from this distance. "It's a telegram," Marcus said. "From Wells Fargo, asking about a missing messenger, Daniel Donovan, asking if Thompson had seen him. Thompson wrote back saying no. But I found something else too, a receipt for a shovel purchased the same day Donovan went missing." Jim felt his pulse quicken. "You think Thompson killed him?" "I think Thompson killed him, took his money, and Rose Miller saw it happen." Marcus looked toward the house. "Is she in there?" Jim didn't answer. "Blake, I'm not here to arrest anyone. I'm here to help you reach Fort Dodge. Because if Thompson catches you first, you're both dead, and the truth dies with you." Rose appeared in the doorway behind Jim. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. "You're the one who helped him torture me," Rose said quietly. "You held the rope while he tied the knots." Marcus's face went pale. "I did, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. I thought you'd just done something bad. I thought the punishment was harsh but legal. I didn't know what you'd seen. Didn't know Thompson was covering up murder." "Would it have mattered?" Rose's voice was hard, cold. "If you'd known—" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I want to say yes, but honestly I don't know. I was afraid of him, afraid of what he'd do if I questioned him. He looked down at his boots. But I'm not afraid anymore. Or maybe I am, but I'm more afraid of staying quiet. Jim lowered the rifle slightly. Why should we trust you? Because I'm the only one who can get you past the bounty hunters. The words hung in the air like smoke. What bounty hunters? Jim asked. Thompson hired 2 men, Jack Winters and his brother, offered them $500 to bring you back, dead or alive. Marcus gestured to the west. They're half a day behind me, following the same trail. You keep riding this direction, you'll run right into them. Jim cursed under his breath. Thompson's that desperate. He's terrified. You and Rose are the only ones who can destroy him. He'll pay any price to keep you quiet. Rose stepped forward, stood beside Jim. If we trust you and you're lying, we're dead. If you don't trust me, and I'm telling the truth, you're dead anyway. Marcus met her eyes. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm asking for it anyway. Let me help you reach Fort Dodge. Let me help make this right. Jim looked at Rose. She looked back. A whole conversation passed between them in silence. Finally, Jim spoke. You got a plan? Marcus nodded. There's an old trail. Runs north through rougher country. Bounty hunters won't know it. We can circle around them. Add a day to the trip, but keep you alive. And then we ride into Fort Dodge together. I testify to what I found. You testify to what you saw. Rose testifies to what Thompson did. And we let federal law sort it out. Jim thought about it, weighed the risks, the alternatives. All right, he said finally, but you ride in front where I can see you. And if you so much as look at your gun wrong, I'll put a bullet in you. Marcus nodded. Fair enough. Rose touched Jim's arm. Are we sure about this? No, Jim said honestly. But we weren't sure about anything since the day I cut you down. Might as well keep the streak going. They rode out 20 minutes later. 3 horses, 3 riders, Marcus in front like Jim had said, Jim and Rose behind. The old trail Marcus mentioned was barely a trail at all, more like a deer path through scrub brush and rocks. Hard riding, slow going. But nobody was following. Jim checked constantly. The horizon stayed empty. They rode until dark, made camp in a small canyon where the walls would hide any fire. Marcus helped with the horses, shared his food, didn't talk much unless spoken to. Smart man. Knew they didn't trust him yet. Knew trust had to be earned. They ate in silence. Beans and hardtack. Not much, but better than nothing. Finally Rose spoke. Why'd you become a deputy? Marcus looked up from his plate, surprised by the question. My father was a lawman, down in Texas. He believed in justice, in protecting people. I wanted to be like him. What happened? He got shot trying to stop a robbery, died doing what he thought was right. Marcus stared into the fire. I came north, found work in Dodge City. Thompson hired me. Seemed like a good man, strong, fair. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already part of it. You could have left. I could have, should have. Marcus looked at her. But I was young, scared, and I told myself I could change things from the inside, that if I stayed I could keep Thompson from going too far. How'd that work out? Rose's voice had an edge. It didn't. I stood by while he did things that would have made my father ashamed, and when he put you on that frame I held the rope. Marcus set his plate down. I can't take that back, can't undo it. All I can do is try to make it right now. Rose was quiet. Jim could see her struggling with it, with forgiveness, with whether Marcus deserved a second chance. People make mistakes, Jim said quietly. Question is what they do after. Rose looked at him, then at Marcus, then nodded. Didn't say anything else, but it was enough. They finished eating. Marcus took first watch, said he'd wake Jim in 4 hours. Jim lay down near the fire. Rose was already asleep, or pretending to be. He stared up at the stars, thought about Mary, about the promise he'd made. He was keeping it now, finally. But at what cost? His ranch was probably burned by now. His life there was over, and he was riding toward a confrontation that could end in a noose for everyone involved. But Rose was alive, and the truth was going to be told. And sometimes that had to be enough. Jim closed his eyes. Let sleep take him. The attack came at dawn. Jim was on watch. Marcus was sleeping. Rose was just waking up. The horses were grazing nearby. Jim saw the movement first. A shadow against the gray morning light. Too deliberate to be an animal. He grabbed his rifle, shouted, "Get down!" The gunshot cracked before anyone could move. Hit the ground 3 feet from where Marcus had been sleeping. Marcus rolled, came up with his pistol drawn. "Where?" "North Ridge," Jim fired back. Didn't aim to hit, just to keep heads down. Rose scrambled behind a rock. Her face was white. "I thought we lost them." "So did I." Marcus fired twice at the ridge. Must have found the trail anyway. Another shot. This one closer. Jim saw the muzzle flash. 2 shooters, maybe more. "Winters," a voice called from the ridge. "Jack Winters, you folks are under arrest." "On whose authority?" Jim shouted back. "Sheriff Thompson's. You're wanted fugitives. Come out with your hands up." Marcus cursed, looked at Jim. "That's a lie. Thompson's got no jurisdiction outside Dodge City." "He knows that." Jim reloaded. "Winters is just doing what he's paid to do." Another voice joined the first, younger. "You got 10 seconds. Then we come down shooting." "That's his brother," Marcus said. "Cole Winters. He's mean but stupid. Jack's the one to worry about." Jim's mind raced. They were pinned. The ridge gave the bounty hunters high ground. Cover. And if there were only 2 of them, eventually they'd split up. Flank. "We need the horses," Rose said. "We can't get trapped here." She was right. Jim looked at where Samuel and the other horses were grazing. 30 yards away. Open ground. "I'll get them," Marcus said. Started to move. "Wait." Jim reached for him. Too late. Marcus ran. Gunfire erupted. 3 shots. 4. Marcus dove behind a boulder, rolled, came up firing. The horses spooked, started running, away from the gunfire, away from them. "No!" Rose screamed. Jim fired at the ridge, trying to give Marcus cover, trying to stop the horses. Marcus made it back to their position, breathing hard. "Sorry, I tried." The horses were gone, disappeared over a rise to the south. They were on foot now, in the middle of nowhere, with 2 armed men hunting them. "This is bad," Rose whispered. "Yeah." Jim scanned the ridge, couldn't see the shooters anymore. They were moving, getting into position. "What do we do?" Marcus asked. Jim thought fast. They had limited ammunition, no horses, no supplies except what they'd grabbed when the shooting started, but they had high ground too if they moved, and the canyon had other ways out. "We go deeper," Jim said. "The canyon narrows a mile up, gets rocky, hard to follow, hard to shoot in. They'll track us. Let them. On foot we're all equal, and I know this country better than they do." It was a thin plan, but it was all they had. They moved, fast, deeper into the canyon. Behind them gunfire followed, bullets hitting rock, kicking up dust. The Winters brothers were coming down from the ridge, following, not giving up. Jim led Rose and Marcus through the narrowing passage. The walls rose steep on both sides. The floor was littered with broken rock. Perfect ambush country if they could set it up right. "Here," Jim said, stopped at a place where a large boulder had fallen. Created a natural barricade. "Marcus, you take that side. I'll take this. Rose, stay low behind us." They got into position. Waited. The sound of boots on rock echoed through the canyon. 2 men. Moving careful. Knowing they were walking into a trap, but coming anyway. $500 was a lot of money. Jim caught a glimpse of them. Jack Winters in front. Tall, lean, rifle ready. His brother Cole behind. Shorter, heavier, pistol in each hand. Professionals. Or close enough. Jim aimed, waited. Let them get closer. 20 yards. 15. 10. "Now!" Jim fired. Marcus fired. Both shots hit rock near Jack's feet. The bounty hunter dove left, rolled, came up shooting. Cole fired wild, hit the canyon wall, shattered rock, sent fragments flying. Jim felt something sting his cheek. Blood, just a graze from stone. He fired again, this time aimed at Cole, caught him in the shoulder. Cole spun, dropped one pistol, didn't go down. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Jack shouted. "Thompson just wants the girl. Hand her over, you two can walk." "Thompson's a murderer," Marcus shouted back. "She's a witness. Don't care what he is. We got a job to do." More gunfire. Rose pressed herself flat against the rock, her hands over her ears. Jim's rifle clicked empty. He grabbed his pistol, fired twice more. Marcus was still shooting. Steady, controlled. Better shot than Jim expected. Then Cole made a mistake. Tried to rush their position while Jack gave cover fire. Marcus stood. Fired. Hit Cole in the leg. Cole went down hard. Screaming. Cursing. Jack saw his brother fall. Made a choice. Grabbed Cole. Started dragging him back. "This ain't over," Jack yelled. "We'll circle back. Find you again." They disappeared around a bend in the canyon. The sound of dragging boots faded. Jim waited, listening, making sure it wasn't a trick. Nothing. "They're gone," Marcus said. "For now." Jim lowered his gun, looked at Rose. "You all right?" She nodded. Couldn't speak, just nodded. "We need to move," Marcus said. "They'll regroup. Come at us different. The horses are gone. We're on foot now." Jim looked up at the canyon walls, at the way forward. "Fort Dodge is 2 days on horseback, 4 days walking, maybe 5. "We don't have 5 days," Rose said. Her voice was shaking. "Thompson's coming. The bounty hunters are coming. We're trapped." "We're not trapped. We're just slowed down." Jim started walking, deeper into the canyon. "Come on. We keep moving, we stay ahead." They walked, single file, Jim in front, Rose in the middle, Marcus bringing up the rear. The sun climbed. The day got hot. They had 2 canteens between them. Not enough. But they walked, because stopping meant dying, and they'd come too far to die now. They walked all day, through the canyon, out onto open prairie again, heading west, always west, toward Fort Dodge. By evening they were exhausted, thirsty. Moving on will more than strength. Jim found a place to rest, a cluster of rocks, some scrubby trees. Not much, but better than nothing. They collapsed, shared the last of the water, said nothing for a long time. Finally Marcus spoke. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Jim didn't answer right away, looked at the horizon, at how much empty land was between them and safety. "Might not," he admitted, "but we're going to try." Rose was staring at her hands, at the bandages on her wrists. They were filthy now, needed changing, but there was nothing to change them with. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault, all of it." "Stop that," Jim said. "It's true. If I hadn't stolen that money, if I'd just stayed quiet, then Thompson would still be killing people, still stealing, still wearing that badge like he deserves it." Jim moved closer. "You did the right thing, Rose. It's just hard, that's all. Doing right is usually hard." Marcus was quiet, staring at the darkening sky. Then he spoke, soft, almost to himself. "Justice ain't about truth. It's about order." Jim froze, felt something cold crawl up his spine. "What did you say?" Marcus looked at him. "Something Thompson said once, when I asked him about a case that didn't sit right. He said justice ain't about truth, it's about order. That keeping people in line matters more than making sure every verdict is fair." Jim's hands started shaking. That phrase, those exact words, he'd heard them before, 10 years ago, in a cold jail cell in Junction City, spoken by a young deputy who was helping a corrupt sheriff frame an innocent woman. Deputy Thompson. Jim stood, fast. The world tilted. "Jim." Rose was on her feet, worried. "What's wrong?" He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pieces were falling into place like stones in a well. Heavy. Inevitable. "Thompson," Jim said. His voice didn't sound like his own. "Eli Thompson. He was in Junction City 10 years ago." Marcus nodded. "He was a deputy there, before he came to Dodge City, before he made sheriff." Jim felt sick. "He worked for Sheriff Hawkins." "I think so, yeah." The world was spinning. Jim sat down hard, put his head in his hands. "Jim, what is it?" Rose knelt beside him. "What's wrong?" "He killed Mary." The words came out broken, bitter. "Not directly, but he helped. He was the one who arrested her. Who planted the evidence? Who stood by while Hawkins let her die? Marcus went pale. Your wife. My wife. Jim looked up. At Marcus. At Rose. At the empty sky. I didn't recognize him. 10 years. Different town. Different rank. He put on weight. Lost some hair. But it's him. Same man. Same evil. Rose's hand found Jim's shoulder. Squeezed. Are you sure? That phrase. Justice ain't about truth. Thompson said it to me the day Mary died. Said it when I begged him to let me take her to a doctor. Said keeping order mattered more than one woman's life. Jim's voice cracked. I've heard those words in my nightmares for 10 years. Marcus stood, started pacing. So Thompson's been doing this for at least a decade. Different towns, same crimes. How many people has he hurt? How many graves has he filled? Rose added quietly. Jim forced himself to stand, forced himself to breathe, to think. This changed things, made them personal in a way they hadn't been before. Thompson hadn't just tried to kill Rose, he'd killed Mary, and probably others in between. He was a plague, a sickness wearing a badge, moving from town to town, destroying lives. And Jim had let him go, 10 years ago, had turned in his badge instead of fighting, had run instead of standing up. Mary had made him promise to stand up next time, but there shouldn't have been a next time. If Jim had been braver 10 years ago, Rose never would have been on that torture frame. Jim, Rose's voice cut through his thoughts, this isn't your fault. I let him go. You were grieving, powerless. He had the whole system behind him. Rose moved in front of Jim, made him look at her. But we're stopping him now. Together. And that matters. Jim wanted to believe her, wanted to think that finally doing right could make up for 10 years of hiding. When we get to Fort Dodge, Marcus said quietly, we need to tell them everything. About Mary, about Daniel Donovan, about however many others there might be. Will they believe us? Rose asked. They'll investigate, Jim said. His voice was steadier now, harder. And when they start digging into Thompson's past, they'll find bodies, literal and otherwise. They sat in silence as night fell, each of them carrying the weight of what they knew now. Thompson wasn't just a corrupt sheriff. He was a killer, a repeating pattern, a man who'd learned how to use the law as a weapon and had been using it for years. And Jim, Rose, and Marcus were the only ones who could stop him. We have to make it to Fort Dodge, Rose said finally. No matter what. We have to. We will, Jim said. And for the first time since cutting Rose down, he felt something other than duty driving him. He felt anger, clean, focused, the kind that gave strength instead of taking it. Thompson had killed Mary, had probably killed dozens, and he was still out there wearing a badge, still hunting them, still thinking he'd get away with it. Not this time. This time Jim Blake wasn't running, wasn't staying quiet, wasn't letting fear win. This time he was keeping his promise, not just to Mary, but to everyone Thompson had ever hurt. Get some rest, Jim said. Tomorrow we cover ground, fast, whatever it takes. Marcus nodded. Rose lay down. Jim took first watch, and in the darkness under stars that had seen too much death, Jim Blake made a second promise. He was going to stop Eli Thompson, or die trying. But either way, the killing was going to end. 3 days later, Fort Dodge appeared on the horizon. 3 days of walking, of hiding from riders, of stretching their water, of pushing past exhaustion into something harder. But they'd made it. The fort sat on a rise, American flags snapping in the wind, wooden walls, guard towers, soldiers moving on patrol, safety, justice, the law that actually worked. They were half a mile away when Jim saw the dust cloud behind them. Riders, coming fast, 3 of them. Run, Jim said. Now! They ran, or tried to. Their legs were nearly gone. Rose stumbled. Marcus caught her, kept her moving. The fort gates were open. Soldiers were visible, watching them approach. The riders behind were gaining. Jim could hear hooves now, could see who it was. Thompson, in front. 2 other men Jim didn't recognize, not the Winters brothers, fresh hired guns probably. They were 200 yards from the fort when a soldier shouted from the wall, "Halt! Identify yourselves!" Jim raised his hands, kept running. "Jim Blake, we need help. Stop where you are." Behind them Thompson was shouting too. "Those are fugitives. I'm Sheriff Thompson, Dodge City. They're wanted criminals." The soldiers at the gate formed a line, rifles ready, confused, two groups approaching, both claiming authority. Jim Rose and Marcus reached the gate first, barely, collapsed to their knees. Thompson arrived seconds later, pulled his horse to a dramatic stop. His badge caught the sunlight. His face was calm, confident. A captain stepped forward, older, gray beard, stars on his shoulders. "What the hell is going on here?" "Captain." Thompson dismounted, touched his hat respectful. "Sheriff Eli Thompson, Dodge City. These three are fugitives, harboring a thief, assaulting officers. I'm here to bring them back for trial." "That's a lie," Rose shouted. Her voice was raw, desperate. "He's a murderer." "Captain, please." Jim struggled to his feet. "My name is Jim Blake. I'm a former deputy marshal. This man killed a Wells Fargo messenger. We have proof." Thompson's face didn't change, didn't even flicker. "Captain, I know this looks confusing, but that girl is a known thief. This man cut her down from lawful punishment. The deputy beside them turned traitor. All I ask is that you release them to my custody." The captain looked between them, calculating, deciding who to believe, a man with a badge, or three exhausted people covered in dirt and desperation. Jim saw which way it was going, saw the captain's face shift toward Thompson. No, not after everything. Not when they were this close. "Captain," Jim said. His voice was steady now, clear. 10 years ago I wore a badge just like Thompson's, Deputy Marshal, Junction City. I know how the law is supposed to work, and I know when a man wearing a badge is hiding behind it instead of serving it." The captain paused. "You were a deputy marshal." "I was. I can prove it. Telegraph Junction City. Ask about Deputy James Blake. Ask what happened to his wife Mary." Thompson's eye twitched. Just barely. Jim saw it. "And while you're at it," Jim continued, "ask who else was working in Junction City 10 years ago. Ask if there was a Deputy Thompson. Ask what happened after I left." "Captain, this is a waste of time," Thompson started. "I'll decide what's a waste of time, Sheriff." The captain's voice went cold, professional. He looked at Marcus. "You're a deputy." "Was a deputy," Marcus said. "Not anymore. I work for Truth now instead of Thompson." The captain studied all of them, then made a decision. "Sergeant, take all 6 of these people into custody. Separate them. I want statements from everyone. And someone get me a telegraph operator." "Captain, I'm a duly elected sheriff." Thompson's voice rose. "And I'm a United States Army captain on federal land. Your badge means exactly nothing here." The captain gestured to his men. "If your story checks out, you'll get your prisoners. If it doesn't, you'll answer questions. Fair enough?" Thompson's jaw worked, but he nodded, smiled, that same cold smile. "Fair enough." They were separated. Jim in one room, Rose in another, Marcus in a third, Thompson and his men in others. Jim sat in a wooden chair. A young lieutenant sat across from him, notebook ready. "Start from the beginning," the lieutenant said. So Jim did. He told about finding Rose on the torture frame, about bringing her to his ranch, about Thompson coming for her, about Rose's confession, about Daniel Donovan. He told about running, about the river, about the bounty hunters, about Marcus joining them. And finally he told about Mary, about Junction City, about a deputy named Thompson who helped a corrupt sheriff destroy innocent lives. The lieutenant wrote it all down, didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When Jim finished, the lieutenant looked up. "That's quite a story, Mr. Blake." "It's the truth." "We'll see." They kept him there for hours, brought him water, bread, let him rest. Through the walls he could hear other voices, Rose telling her story, Marcus telling his, and somewhere Thompson telling his version, the one where he was the victim, the hero, the lawman just doing his job. It was evening when the captain came in, sat down across from Jim, laid out a telegram. "Wells Fargo confirms a messenger named Daniel Donovan went missing 3 weeks ago," the captain said, "carrying a shipment worth $2,000. Never reached his destination." Jim's heart jumped. "So you believe us?" "I believe a man is missing, and you claim to know where he is." The captain leaned forward. Rose Miller gave us specific coordinates. A cut bank on the Arkansas River. We're sending men to dig there tomorrow. What about Thompson? What about him? He's a sheriff. You're a former lawman turned rancher. She's a thief. Until we find something concrete, it's his word against yours. Jim felt the weight of it. Still not enough. Still not believed. Captain, I'm telling you the truth. Maybe you are. Or maybe you helped the girl escape and came up with a story to justify it. The captain stood. We'll know more tomorrow, after the excavation. Until then, all of you stay here. He left. Jim sat alone in the room, listened to the fort settling in for the night, listened to his own breathing. They were so close. The truth was so close to the surface. But close didn't mean safe. Thompson was on the other side of this fort, probably smiling, probably confident that the law would see his badge and ignore everything else, just like it had 10 years ago. Jim closed his eyes, thought about Mary, about her promise. He'd kept it. He'd stood up. But would it be enough? Or would Thompson walk free again? Would the system protect him again? Jim didn't know. All he could do was wait. Wait for morning. Wait for soldiers to dig up a grave. Wait for bones to prove what words couldn't. And pray that this time finally justice would be more than just order. This time it had to be truth. Morning came with the sound of horses and men preparing to ride. Jim watched through the small window of his room as soldiers assembled in the courtyard. 20 men, shovels, rifles, Captain Hayes leading them. They were going to the cut bank. A guard opened Jim's door. Captain wants you to come. Show them where. Jim stood. His legs were stiff from sleeping on a hard bunk, but his mind was sharp, alert. This was it. The moment everything would be proved or lost. They brought Rose out next. Then Marcus. Thompson and his men stayed behind under guard. The sheriff had protested, said it was a waste of time, said there was nothing to find, but Hayes had overruled him. If there's nothing there, this will be settled quick. If there is something, I want to know what. They rode in a wagon, Jim, Rose, and Marcus together, soldiers on horses surrounding them. The morning sun was already hot, promised to be brutal by afternoon. Rose sat close to Jim, didn't speak, just stared at her hands. Marcus looked out at the prairie. His face was set, hard, like he was preparing himself for what they might find. How far? Hayes called from his horse. 3 miles, Rose said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Southeast, along the river. There's a bend where the bank is steep. Clay soil, red. That's where I saw him take the body. They rode in silence after that. The only sounds were hooves and wheels and wind through grass. Jim thought about Daniel Donovan, about a man just doing his job, carrying money for Wells Fargo, probably thinking about getting home to his wife, about what he'd have for supper, about ordinary things. And then Thompson, a bullet in the back, the ground swallowing him up like he'd never existed. Except he had existed, and his wife was looking for him, and Rose had carried the weight of knowing for 3 weeks. No more secrets after today, one way or another. They reached the river. Rose directed them along the bank, looking for landmarks. There, she said finally, pointed to a spot where the bank rose steep, where red clay was visible, where scrub brush grew thick. The wagon stopped. Everyone dismounted. Hayes walked to the edge, looked down at the bank, then at Rose. You're sure? I'm sure. I watched him from that rise. She pointed back toward higher ground. I followed at a distance, hid in the grass, watched him dig for an hour, maybe more. Then he filled it in, smoothed it over, drove away. Hayes nodded. All right, let's dig. The soldiers started working, slow, methodical, taking turns with the shovels. The clay was hard, packed down. This wasn't going to be quick. Jim sat in the shade of the wagon, Rose beside him. Marcus stood, watching, couldn't seem to sit still. An hour passed. 2. The hole got deeper. 3 feet, 4, 5. The sun climbed higher. Men took breaks, drank water, went back to digging. Jim started to worry. What if Rose had the wrong spot? What if Thompson had moved the body? What if they dug all day and found nothing? Then one of the soldiers stopped. Captain, we got something. Everyone moved closer. Jim's heart was pounding. The soldier carefully cleared away more dirt, revealed cloth, rotted, stained, but clearly cloth. "Keep going," Hayes said. "Careful now." They dug slower, more precise. The cloth became a shape, the shape became a body. Skeletal mostly. 3 weeks in the ground had done damage, but enough remained, enough to see what it had been. A man, average height, wearing the remains of a vest, and pinned to that vest, dull but unmistakable, was a Wells Fargo badge. Rose made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. Jim put his arm around her shoulders, felt her shaking. "Daniel Donovan," Marcus said quietly. My God, she was telling the truth. Hayes climbed down into the excavation, examined the body, looked at the badge, looked at where the back of the skull had a hole in it. "Gunshot wound," Hayes said. "Back of the head. Execution style." He climbed back up, looked at Rose with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Miss Miller, you have my apology, and my word that justice will be served." Rose nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Hayes turned to his sergeant. "Photograph everything. Document the exact location. Then prepare the remains for transport back to the fort." He paused. "And send someone to Dodge City. Find his widow, Sarah Donovan. She deserves to know." "What about Thompson?" Marcus asked. Hayes's jaw tightened. "We're going back to the fort, and Sheriff Thompson is going to answer for this." They rode back faster than they'd come. The mood had shifted. The soldiers were angry now, one of their own in a way, a federal employee murdered by a man wearing a badge. Jim could feel it in the air, the weight of proof, the certainty that came from finding bones. Thompson wasn't talking his way out of this. When they arrived back at Fort Dodge, Hayes went straight to the room where Thompson was being held. Jim Rose and Marcus were brought along. Witnesses. Evidence. Thompson was sitting at a table when they entered. Calm. Composed. Like he was still in control. "Captain," he said, "I trust this wild chase proved nothing." Hayes set a leather bag on the table. It was dirty, stained, but the Wells Fargo stamp was still visible. "We found Daniel Donovan," Hayes said, "right where Miss Miller said he'd be, shot in the back of the head, badge still on his vest. This bag was buried near him. Serial numbers match Wells Fargo's missing shipment." Thompson's face didn't change. "I don't know anything about that." "You killed him." "I did no such thing. Someone else must have—" "You killed him 3 weeks ago in your office. Rose Miller saw you. You took his money, buried his body, and when she tried to expose you, you tortured her." Thompson's eyes flicked to Rose, cold, calculating. "She's a thief, a liar. Her word means nothing." "Her word led us to a body," Hayes said. "To evidence. To proof." "Coincidence. She could have heard rumors. Could have—" "Enough." Hayes's voice cut like a blade. "Sheriff Eli Thompson, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Donovan, for theft of federal property, and for whatever other crimes we uncover when we start digging into your past." Thompson stood, fast. His hand went to his hip, to where his gun usually was. But his gun was gone, taken when he'd been brought to the fort. 2 soldiers grabbed him, one on each arm. For the first time, Thompson's composure cracked. His face went red, angry. "You can't do this. I'm a duly elected sheriff. I have rights." "You had responsibilities," Hayes said. "You violated them. Now you face consequences." They started to drag Thompson toward the door. He fought. Not much. Not enough to really resist. Just enough to make a point. "This isn't over," he shouted. "I know people. I have connections. You think some dead body proves anything, you think?" He saw Jim, standing by the wall, watching. Thompson's voice changed, got quieter, meaner. "Blake, this is your fault. You should have minded your own business." Jim stepped forward, looked Thompson in the eyes. "You killed my wife, 10 years ago, in Junction City. You were Deputy Thompson then, working for Sheriff Hawkins. You arrested Mary Blake on false charges, let her die in a cell." Thompson's eyes widened, just slightly, recognition. "I don't know what you're—" "Justice ain't about truth, it's about order." Jim quoted Thompson's own words back to him. "You said that to me the day Mary died. I've carried those words for 10 years. Now you're going to carry them to a noose." Something shifted in Thompson's face. Fear, maybe, or the realization that the past had finally caught up. "I was following orders," he said. "Hawkins told me, I don't care." Jim's voice was quiet. Final. "You had a choice. You chose wrong. Now you pay." The soldiers dragged Thompson out. His shouts faded down the hallway, turned into echoes. Then nothing. Hayes looked at Jim. "You'll need to testify. About Junction City. About your wife. We'll need to build a complete case." "I'll testify," Jim said. "To everything." Hayes nodded, turned to Rose. "You too, Miss Miller. Your testimony is crucial." "I'll tell everything I saw," Rose said. "But what about the theft? I still stole that money." "You stole money that was already stolen, from a murderer. We'll sort out the legal details later, but I suspect a judge will be lenient given the circumstances." Rose didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Hayes dismissed them, said they could rest, that they'd be called for formal statements soon. Jim, Rose, and Marcus walked out into the afternoon sun. After days of running of fear of uncertainty, they were finally safe. The truth was known, the proof was found, and Thompson was in chains. "We did it," Marcus said. He sounded surprised. "We actually did it." "Yeah," Jim said. "We did." Rose sat down on a bench outside the barracks, put her face in her hands, started crying. Not sad crying, relief crying, the kind that came from holding too much for too long. Jim sat beside her. Didn't say anything. Just sat. Marcus stood nearby, looking out at the prairie, at the direction they'd come from, at the path that had led them here. After a while, Rose stopped crying, wiped her face, looked at Jim. "What happens now?" Now. Jim thought about it. About his ranch that was probably burned. About his life that was certainly over. About what came next. "Now we tell the truth. All of it. And we let justice work the way it's supposed to." Rose nodded. "And after that?" Jim didn't have an answer. Couldn't see past the next few days. Couldn't imagine what normal looked like anymore. But he'd kept his promise to Mary. And that was enough for now. "After that," he said finally, "we'll figure it out." Thompson tried to run 2 days later. It happened during transport. Hayes had decided to move Thompson to a more secure facility. Irons on his wrists, 4 guards, a wagon. They were loading him when he made his move. Broke free somehow, knocked one guard down, started running for the horses. Marcus was in the courtyard, saw it happen. For a split second he could have just watched, could have let Thompson get on a horse, let him ride away, let someone else make the hard choice. But Marcus had spent 2 years making the easy choice, the safe choice, standing by while Thompson did terrible things. Not this time. Marcus drew his pistol. "Thompson." "Stop." Thompson didn't stop, reached a horse, started to mount. Marcus aimed. His hand was shaking. This was his boss, his friend, or had been once. "I said stop." Thompson got one foot in the stirrup, looked back, saw Marcus, smiled that cold smile. "You won't shoot me, Reed. You don't have the spine." And Marcus saw it all in that moment, saw every time he'd looked away, every time he'd held a rope while an innocent person suffered, every time he'd chosen fear over right, saw his father's face, disappointed, ashamed. Marcus steadied his hand, aimed low, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the courtyard. Thompson screamed, fell, grabbed his leg where the bullet had torn through his thigh. Guards rushed in, pinned Thompson down, secured him. Hayes appeared, looked at Thompson bleeding on the ground, looked at Marcus still holding the smoking pistol. "Good shot, deputy," Hayes said. "I'm not a deputy anymore." "Maybe you should be." Marcus lowered the gun. His hands were shaking worse now. He'd just shot a man, shot his former boss, his friend, but he'd done it to stop a murderer from escaping, to keep justice from slipping away. "I need to sit down," Marcus said. Hayes guided him to a bench, got him water, let him shake. Jim and Rose came running. They'd heard the shot. "What happened?" Jim asked. "Thompson tried to run," Hayes said. "Marcus stopped him." Rose looked at Marcus, at the gun still in his hand, at his pale face. "Are you all right?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "But I will be." Thompson was carried away, shouting, cursing, bleeding but not dying. The bullet had hit exactly where Marcus had aimed, Enough to stop him, not enough to kill. Precision, control, the mark of a good lawman. Later, when everything had settled, Hayes found Marcus. That was a hard thing you did. Had to be done. Most men couldn't have made that shot. Under pressure. Against someone they knew. You kept your head, did what needed doing. Marcus looked at his hands. They'd stopped shaking. My father used to say that wearing a badge meant making hard choices, meant doing right even when it hurt. He was right. Hayes paused. Dodge City is going to need a new sheriff. Thompson's going to hang. The town deserves someone who knows what the badge really means. Marcus looked up. You're offering me the job. I'm saying the town should decide, but I'd recommend you, if you're interested. Marcus thought about it. About going back to Dodge City. About wearing a badge again. About trying to fix what Thompson had broken. I'm interested, he said, if they'll have me. Hayes nodded. Then we'll make it official once this trial is done. The trial took 3 weeks. They brought in a federal judge, set up court at Fort Dodge, called witnesses from Dodge City, from Junction City, from Wells Fargo. Jim testified about Mary, about Deputy Thompson and Sheriff Hawkins, about corruption that went back a decade. Rose testified about seeing the murder, about the torture, about 3 weeks of silence born from fear. Marcus testified about the evidence he'd found, about the pattern of missing money, about crimes covered up. Wells Fargo sent representatives, confirmed Daniel Donovan had been one of theirs, confirmed the money matched their missing shipment. And Sarah Donovan sat in the front row, crying, finally knowing what had happened to her husband, finally able to grieve properly. Thompson's lawyer tried to fight it, claimed it was all circumstantial, that Rose was a thief, that Jim had a grudge, that Marcus was a traitor. But the bones didn't lie. The Wells Fargo badge didn't lie. The bullet hole in Daniel Donovan's skull didn't lie. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, came back with a verdict. Guilty, murder, theft, corruption, abuse of power. The judge sentenced Thompson to hang, date to be set, justice to be served. Thompson stood when he heard the verdict, looked around the courtroom, at all the faces staring back, at the people he'd hurt, the people he'd underestimated. His eyes found Jim. This doesn't change anything, Blake. Your wife is still dead. Yeah, Jim said quietly. But now you'll join her, and she died innocent. You'll die guilty. Thompson was led away, out of the courtroom, toward a cell, toward a noose. The room emptied slow, people talking, processing, trying to understand how a sheriff had done such terrible things for so long. Rose sat in her seat, staring at nothing. Jim sat beside her. It's over, she said. Yeah. Why don't I feel better? Because justice doesn't heal everything, Jim said. It just makes sure the guilty pay. The hurt they caused doesn't go away. Rose looked at him. Will it ever get better? The guilt. The feeling that I should have spoken sooner. I don't know. It's been 10 years for me. Still hurts. But it hurts different now. Hurts like an old wound instead of a fresh one. They sat in silence for a while. Then Hayes approached. Miss Miller. A word. Rose stood. Followed him to a quieter corner. Jim watched them talk. Saw Rose's face change from worried to surprised to relieved. She came back. They're not charging me with theft. What? Hayes said, given the circumstances, given that I was trying to return stolen property, given what Thompson did to me, a judge would likely dismiss any charges. He's recommending no prosecution. Jim smiled. First time in weeks. That's good news? There's a condition. I have to testify if they find more victims. If they dig into Thompson's past and find other crimes, I have to be willing to come back, to tell what I saw. Will you? Rose nodded. I will, as many times as it takes. Sarah Donovan asked to meet with Rose the next day. Rose almost said no, almost ran, almost chose the easy path of avoiding pain. But Jim had taught her something. Running from hard things didn't make them easier, just postponed them. So she said yes. They met in a small room at the fort, private, quiet. Sarah was in her late 30s, dark hair, kind eyes that had cried too much lately. She looked at Rose like she was trying to decide something. You saw my husband die, Sarah said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. Did he suffer? Rose could have told the whole story, every detail, the argument, the shot, the fall. But that wasn't what Sarah was asking. No, Rose said gently. It was quick. He didn't suffer. It was a kindness, maybe a small lie. But some truths were too heavy for grieving widows to carry. Sarah's shoulders sagged, relief. Thank you, for telling the truth, for being brave enough to speak up. I should have spoken sooner. I'm so sorry. You were afraid. I understand fear. Sarah reached out, took Rose's hand. You gave me answers. You gave me closure. You gave me my husband back so I can bury him properly. That's a gift. Rose started crying. Couldn't help it. This woman whose husband she'd let stay buried for 3 weeks was thanking her. I don't deserve your kindness, Rose whispered. Maybe not. But you have it anyway. Sarah squeezed her hand. Thompson took my husband. You helped bring him to justice. That matters. They talked for a little while longer. Sarah asked about the burial site, about whether Daniel had said anything before he died. Rose answered what she could. Gentle, honest when it mattered. When Sarah left, she hugged Rose. A real hug. Forgiveness in physical form. Rose sat alone in the room after, crying, but lighter somehow, like part of the weight had lifted. A week later, the formal proceedings were done. Thompson was in federal custody, waiting for his execution date. The evidence was documented, the testimony recorded. Jim Rose and Marcus were free to go. Hayes called them into his office. The Army thanks you for your service to justice. You'll each receive compensation for your time and trouble, and we'll provide horses for your journey home. Home, Jim said. Thought about his ranch, wondered if it was still standing, doubted it. What will you do now? Hayes asked. Jim looked at Rose. She looked back. A whole conversation in silence. I don't know yet, Jim said finally, but we'll figure it out. Marcus spoke up. I'm going back to Dodge City. Take the sheriff position if they'll have me. Try to rebuild what Thompson broke. Hayes nodded. You'll make a good sheriff, a real one. They rode out of Fort Dodge 3 days later. 3 horses. 3 people who'd become something like family through fire and blood and truth. Marcus split off when they reached the road to Dodge City, shook hands with Jim, hugged Rose. Thank you, he said, for giving me a chance to do right. Thank you for taking it, Jim replied. Marcus rode north. Jim and Rose rode east, toward what used to be Jim's ranch. They didn't talk much during the ride, just let the prairie wind fill the silence. 2 days later they saw it. Jim's ranch, still standing. Barn was burned, fence was torn up in places, but the house was intact. They dismounted, walked through what used to be Jim's life. It's fixable, Rose said. Most of it anyway. Jim looked around, at the work that would need doing, at the months of rebuilding ahead, at the loneliness that used to live here. Yeah, he said, it's fixable. Rose turned to him. Jim, I don't have anywhere to go. No family, no money, no prospects. She paused. The judge said I could work off what I owe, for taking that money, for the trouble I caused. If you'll have me, I'd like to work here, help rebuild, pay my debt. Jim studied her. This girl who'd survived torture, who'd found courage when it mattered, who'd given him a chance to keep a promise. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know, but I want to stay anyway, if that's all right. Jim thought about it, about living alone again, about going back to the quiet that had felt safe, but was really just hiding. It's all right, he said. More than all right. The weeks that followed were work, hard work, rebuilding the barn, fixing fences, bringing the ranch back to life. Rose learned as she went, how to hammer nails, how to mend leather, how to gentle horses. She was clumsy at first, made mistakes, but she kept trying, kept learning. One evening, about a month after they'd returned, Jim was teaching her how to tie proper knots, the kind used for leading horses, for securing loads, for ranch work. Like this, he said, demonstrated slowly. Loop here, pull through, tighten. Rose tried, got it wrong, the rope tangled. Sorry, she said. I'm terrible at this. Try again. She did. Wrong again. Frustrated, she pulled the rope apart, started over. Jim watched. Didn't correct her. Didn't take over. Just let her figure it out. Third try she got it. The knot held. Proper. Strong. I did it, she said, surprised. You did. Why didn't you just show me? Would have been faster. Jim smiled. Small. Genuine. Some things you have to learn by doing, not by being told. Rose looked at the knot, then at Jim, understanding something deeper than rope work. Like courage, she said. Like courage. They finished the evening chores as the sun set. The Kansas sky turned gold and red and purple. The same sky that had watched them run. The same sky that had watched them fight. The same sky that was watching them heal. That night they sat on the newly rebuilt porch. 2 chairs. 2 people. Comfortable silence. Jim, Rose said. Yeah. Do you think Mary would be proud of what you did? Jim was quiet for a long time, thinking about his wife, about her promise, about the 10 years he'd wasted hiding from it. I think she'd be glad I finally listened, he said. Rose nodded, didn't push further. The stars came out, more than you could count. The same stars that had seen Daniel Donovan die. The same stars that had seen Mary Blake die. The same stars that had seen Thompson finally face justice. The same stars that were watching 2 broken people find something like peace. Jim Blake had kept his promise, had stood up when it mattered, had chosen right over safe. And Rose Miller had found her courage, had spoken truth when silence would have been easier, had survived and come out stronger. Neither of them were the same people they'd been a month ago. They'd been changed by fire, by fear, by the choice to do right when wrong was everywhere. The prairie wind moved through the grass, made that sound like ocean waves, like the world breathing. Tomorrow they'd work on the southern fence, fix the gate, maybe start on the new chicken coop. Tomorrow there would be ordinary things, normal things, the kind of things that made a life instead of just surviving. But tonight they just sat. 2 people who'd walked through hell and come out the other side, not perfect, not whole, but alive, and together, and free. The rope burns on Rose's wrists were healing. The scars would stay, but scars were just proof that you'd survived something that tried to kill you. Jim looked at his hands, calloused, weathered. The same hands that had cut Rose down from that torture frame, the same hands that had held a badge once, the same hands that were learning how to build instead of run. Jim, Rose said again. Yeah, thank you for not riding past. Jim thought about that day, about seeing her hanging there, about the choice that had changed everything. Thank you for giving me a reason not to, he said. The stars wheeled overhead. The night deepened. The prairie settled into darkness. And somewhere far away in a federal prison, Eli Thompson sat in a cell, waiting for a noose, waiting for justice, waiting for the end that came for everyone eventually. But here on this small ranch in the middle of Kansas, nowhere life was just beginning again. Not easy, never easy, but real and honest and earned through blood and courage and truth. Rose stood, stretched. I'm going to bed. Early start tomorrow. Yeah. Night, Rose. Night, Jim. She went inside. Jim stayed on the porch a while longer, looking at the stars, thinking about promises kept and lives saved and second chances. Mary would have liked Rose, he thought, would have seen the strength under the fear, the goodness under the mistakes, would have been proud that Jim finally did what needed doing. The wind picked up. Cooler now, autumn coming to the prairie. Jim stood, went inside, to his small house that wasn't quite so lonely anymore, to a life that wasn't just about surviving, but about living, really living. He'd cut Rose down from that rope, but in a way she'd cut him down too, from the rope of guilt and hiding and broken promises. Some ropes bind you, hurt you, torture you, but some ropes, when tied right, set you free. Jim Blake knew the difference now, and that knowledge bought with pain and fear, and the choice to stand up was worth more than safety ever could be. He closed the door, locked it, checked the windows. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with work, with healing, with the slow building of a life that meant something. But tonight, for the first time in 10 years, Jim Blake slept without guilt. The promise was kept, and that was enough. 6 months later, Marcus Reed pinned on the sheriff's badge in Dodge City. The town had voted, near unanimous. They wanted someone who'd proven he could do right when it mattered. The first thing Marcus did was take down the old torture frame, burned it, let the ashes scatter on the wind. The second thing he did was start training new deputies, teaching them what the badge really meant, what justice actually looked like when it was done right. Thompson hanged on a cold November morning. Federal execution. Quick. Professional. Justice served. Sarah Donovan buried her husband proper, next to his parents in Denver. A good grave, a real headstone. Peace, finally. And on a small ranch east of Dodge City, Jim Blake taught Rose Miller how to tie knots, how to mend fences, how to build a life from broken pieces. She learned slow, made mistakes, but kept trying. And sometimes when the work was done and the Kansas sky turned that particular shade of gold, they'd sit on the porch together. Two people who'd survived what shouldn't be survivable, who'd chosen courage when fear was easier, who'd found family in the most unlikely way. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. Some things were understood without words. The rope burns on Rose's wrists faded to white scars, barely visible. But she remembered them, remembered where she'd been, what she'd survived. And every time she tied a knot loop here, pull through, tighten, she remembered that some bindings hurt and some bindings heal. It just depended on who was holding the rope, and whether they used it to torture or to teach, to imprison or to free. Jim Blake had chosen to free her, and in doing so had freed himself. The promise made to a dying woman in a cold jail cell had finally been kept. And though Mary Blake's bones were in Junction City ground, her spirit was here. In every choice Jim made, in every time he stood up instead of staying silent, in every rope cut, every truth told, every hard thing done because it was right. The prairie wind moved through the grass, the stars came out, the night settled soft, and two people who'd been strangers a year ago sat in comfortable silence, building a life. One day, one knot, one choice at a time. The West was hard, always had been, always would be, but it was also honest, stripped away pretense, showed you what you were really made of. And Jim Blake and Rose Miller had been tested, had been broken, had been remade, not perfect, never perfect, but real, and brave, and free. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for.